Hey, Zach. So I'm going to go through bits and pieces of this, kind of going to jump around a little bit because I only have 10 minutes because Screencast finally does 10-minute increments. So I'm going to start with the first page and then kind of just jump from different problems. The whole first page for you is just putting like terms together. So just pretend that they're x's instead of i's. So I have 1i minus 1i. That's going to give me 0. On the next one, you have negative 6i, and then you're adding 3i to it, so it's just negative 3i. Nothing's going to be squared because you're not multiplying, so just pretend the parentheses aren't there. The only thing you do have to worry about is when you have a negative sign, that has to go to both. So this is 3 minus 7 minus 6i. Well, these are your like terms, so I get negative 4 minus 6i as my answer. So on number 4, negative 8i, subtracting 6i, it's going to make it more negative, so it's negative 4i. The next one that I want, this one is going to distribute to both, so it's really minus 5 minus 8i. Well, I have a positive, so those are going to go away. And then those two are going to go away, so I get 0 again. On number 6, my like terms are to put these two together to get negative 13, and to put these two together, and that's going to give me a positive 2i. Okay, so that's how the whole front page is going to go, is just putting your like terms together. So now I'm going to jump to number 11, which is the first one on your second page. These are a little bit harder because they're multiplication. So what I would do is work one at a time. So these two are going to go together and give you 8i squared. Okay, well I know that I squared is equal to negative 1. That's always going to be the case. So what this really is 8 times negative 1. So I'm replacing that. So I get negative 8 times 3i. So my final answer is negative 24i. Okay, so anytime you see an I squared, you're just going to switch it out with the number negative 1. On number 12, you're just multiplying those together and just simply getting negative 9i. 13, I'm going to take this and distribute it. When I distribute here, I get negative 10i. When I distribute it to the outside, that's going to become plus 12i squared. Okay, well remember that I squared we said was negative 1. So this is really 12 times negative 1, which is negative 12. And this has an imaginary, so I can't combine the like terms, so I'm just going to go ahead and leave them like that. Number 14, multiplying those together, I get negative 2i squared. So it's negative 2 times negative 1, because that's what I squared is. So my final answer is just 2. Okay, so these bottom two on here, you're going to have to FOIL. So remember, first outer, inner, last for these. Try and extend my page a little bit. So my first is going to be these two together, which gives me 10. Then I'm going to take this 2 all the way to the outside and get 12i, except it's negative because of that negative sign right there. Then I'm going to jump to the inside and get negative 30i, and then take this all the way out to the outside and get plus 36i squared, because it's a negative times a negative. Okay, so now I have to simplify this as much as I can. So this I squared is really 36 times negative 1. So that's going to equal a negative 36. So for numbers, I have these two numbers that can go together. So in putting those two together, it's going to give me a negative 26. And then these are like terms because they're both imaginary. Okay, so that's going to give me a negative 42i, not squared, because we're just adding them together. It's I and I. We're not multiplying them. So then that's negative 42i. So this is your final answer for how to do that. So you just want to go first, outer, inner, last, and then put them together. Okay, same thing on number 16. Putting those together, my first is going to be negative 16. Then I'm going to take this all the way to the outside and get a positive 8i because it's a negative times a negative. Inner is going to give me a negative 2i. And then my last is going to give me a positive I squared. Okay, well what I know I squared is I know it's negative 1. So I can go ahead and put these two together. Those are my numbers. So that's going to give me a negative 17. Then I'm going to put these two together. And that's going to give me 8 and negative 2. So it's going to give me 6i. And that's my final answer. Okay, so multiplication, you're just multiplying them, and the only thing that changes is when you see an I squared, you put negative 1 in its place. So the hardest part is when you have 3 of them. So 3 of them I have to go left to right. So I have to do this first. So when I do that, I get negative 49i minus 56i squared. Okay, so negative 49i. Well, this is times negative 1, so it's really going to become plus 56. And then I have to drop down the second one. Okay, so I've already worked with the first 2. Now I'm bringing this one down. And now I have to FOIL these together. Okay, so when I FOIL those together, my first is going to go here. Got to get my calculator. 49 times 6 is going to be negative 294i. Then we're going to go outer. So that's 49 times 8. 392, and that one's going to be positive. 392i squared because it's I times I. Inner is taking this one here first, so 56 times 6 is 336. And then my last is taking this to the outside and going 56 times 8, which is 448i, and it's negative. Okay, so your like terms are kind of jumbled around here. So what you know is that this I squared is really a negative 1. So this is really negative 392. Okay, so in terms of numbers, you have these 2 to put together. So you have 336 and negative 392. You're just adding those together, and you get negative 56. Okay, so then in terms of imaginary numbers, negative and negative, those are going to go together. So negative 448 and negative 294 is going to give you negative 742i. And that's your final answer. Okay, so that's how you're going to do 19.2, but I'm going to go ahead and skip that so I can get to the last part, which is probably the hardest. Okay, this is called rationalizing. So when you just have one thing in the bottom, just an I, you can't have this I in the bottom, so you have to get rid of it. So what I have to do is multiply by I over I. When I do that, I go straight across the top and I get negative 10i. Then I go across the bottom and I get negative 5i squared. Okay, well here's what happens is this is really negative 5 times negative 1, which is 5. So the denominator is 5. And the top is negative 10i. Well then I say, okay, I can reduce this. These are both divisible by 5. So I get negative 2i is my final answer. Same thing on 22. I have to get rid of the I on the bottom, so I have to multiply it by I. So the top is going to give me 1i. The bottom is going to give me 3i squared. Well, I squared is really times negative 1, so it's 1i over negative 3. 23, same thing. There's just an I. Multiply it by I over I. Negative 7i over negative 7i squared. Well, this is really negative 7 times negative 1, so I get negative 7i over a positive 7. So these can reduce, and I just get negative I for my answer. Okay, 24 is the same way. I over I, 10i on top, negative 8i squared on the bottom, which is negative 8 times negative 1, which is 8. Okay, so I have 10i over 8. Well, those can both be divided by 2, so I get 5i over 4, and that's as low as I can reduce that. Okay, so when you just have an I in the bottom, that's all you need to multiply by. But here, starting with number 27, I don't have that. I have 2 parts, so I have to multiply by what's called the conjugate. The conjugate of this is 2 plus 5i. It's the opposite. Okay, I had to switch this middle sign, and I have to do that to both. I have to multiply that to the top and to the bottom. Okay, so to the top, to the numerator, all I'm doing is distributing that. So I get negative 12i and then plus 30i squared. We're going to come back and simplify that once we do the bottom part. The bottom I actually have to FOIL. So my first is going to be a positive 4 from here. My outer is going to be a negative 10i. Inner is going to be a positive 10i. And my last is going to be a negative 25i squared. So I'm running out of time and this is going to cut off, so I'm going to have to make another one. So just hang tight and let me redo that.